Hello, this is a Pacesetter training video on using Xactimate Sketch when we are drawing interior rooms. If you need a refresher course or you're new to Sketch and Xactimate, you may want to check out some of the other videos we have. And also on Sketch, we have some on drawing roofs, some general navigation tools. Take a look at those if that might help you. Before we begin on the interiors, keep in mind that we can go up to Options, Preferences, and this opens up Sketch preferences for Xactimate for this particular claim. Keep in mind that this is not global settings for all of your claims in Xactimate, but only global settings for Sketch in this particular claim you're working in. And in these preferences, you can set global settings like snapping to grid, how close it snaps to the grid, what your wall thicknesses are, for instance, if you want to include ridge cap or not. Let's say we go down to doors and windows. What type of door, what size the door and windows are. Keep that in mind. You can set these by default, ceiling heights, wall widths, things like that. So you have preferences you can set before you begin your sketch. Before we begin, also keep in mind that with most software, including Xactimate, you can use keyboard shortcuts. Some people like to use shortcuts in their workflow. If you mouse over the tools, you'll see the appropriate shortcuts. Roof would be the letter F. Room would be the letter R. For instance, wall would be Shift W. So just keep that in mind. If that is good for your workflow, you can use that. So let's drop a room in. We'll select R for our shortcut. And again, basically the same. Anywhere you look at Xactimate Sketch, you're going to have your blue handles that you can drag to measurements. Once activated, you can click in the highlighted blue measurements, type in your numbers. You can double click on the room name, rename the room. It autofills for you. This also lets you look at some of the variable codes, the measurements currently that you have calculated in the background. It also allows you to change some of the things in the room. You can change the wall thickness here, the ceiling height from 8 feet to 9 feet, for instance. You can change the ceiling type from the default that's a box to, for instance, a peaked ceiling. It will have default measurements for the different peaked ceiling measurement areas. If you click on these areas, it'll show you a red line in a small diagram to tell you what measurement it's referring to. And then let's take a peek at our 3D view. There's a peaked ceiling. We can change those preferences, or rather properties, to change the shape of that peaked ceiling. Again, if we go into the peaked ceiling height, maybe it's 14 feet. Maybe the short wall is 6 feet. Let's take a look at this. A little bit different shape. So just keep that in mind, that within properties, you can make quite a few changes if you need to. Vertex tools, again, works the same way. You can pull angles out. You can hold the Shift key to pull finer angles out and have more control if you want to do that, if you need that. A little bit, not quite as common. There's different ways to do this, but you certainly can use the vertex tool. It may come in handy depending on the way the building is shaped. So let's open this up a little bit. Look at a couple of other tools that are commonly used. One is the wall tool. So a lot of adjusters, when they're starting, they may want to try to draw a room inside a room that they've already drawn. So for instance, let's change this and say this is the master bedroom. We want to put a closet in here. So the adjuster clicks on their room icon and they try to drop a room in here. That doesn't work. Maybe they line it up to a wall and they click and it just won't cooperate. Well, no, it won't cooperate. Xactimate won't let you drop a room in an interior room. So the way you can do this, there's several ways, but the easiest and quickest is using your break tool. This is the square break tool. Pull it out onto the wall that you want to start with. And as you see, if I'm mousing over, I'm moving my mouse, it's giving me measurements. If I've already taken the internal measurement, let's say is 8 feet, so that 11 foot 11 inches, I want to drag it to the left where that's 8 feet. That's my interior measurement. Click. Now I hold the control key down and I pull this out to the width of the room, the interior measurement that I took in the field. Let's say it's 5 feet. There we have our interior room. That's our closet. Okay. Another way you can do that, again, the brake tool is probably the quickest, but another way you can do that is using the wall tool. The wall tool allows you to draw walls. Same thing. So you can move it along the wall. We said this was 5 feet from the corner. You click, drag your wall to, 8 feet is what we said. Drag another wall. There's your room. The wall tool is really powerful also to draw angles and shape rooms within rooms quickly. If you have larger rooms that you need to cordon off in the way the walls are built, it might be a little bit quicker and easier to use the wall tool to do that, particularly if they're at different angles. So for instance, let's pull this master bedroom out a little bit. We'll open this up. Pretty good sized closet, let's say. And then let's say we had a bathroom over here built in, and we want to use the wall tool, and it's shaped like this. Maybe we have a toilet in here. Another great use of the wall tool. The wall tool lets you draw walls at different angles. Very, very powerful tool. If you'll notice, it also creates a separate room when we use the wall tool. Doesn't matter the shape you're using, you're cordoning off another room inside another room, and that creates a completely separate room, completely separate measurements, completely separate properties and variable codes. So keep that in mind. Let's keep going here. I'm going to delete some of this stuff here. Well, let's just delete the whole thing and start over. Let's start with doing a quick floor plan. And we're going to go over some scenarios here, which is the most common thing you're going to see out in the field. Usually that's going to be water damage, painting ceilings and walls, and or replacing floors, maybe baseboards, detaching and resetting or replacing and painting baseboards. So let's take a look at this. So let's use our R. Again, we're not going to make this to scale. We're just going to draw this very quickly. These are a couple of bedrooms. Let's make this a hallway. Go a little bit further here. Maybe we'll make a little closet right here. Remember, there's different ways we can do this to make the closet. We could stop right here. Then we could drop another room in and shape it. We could click on one of these walls, hold the control key down, and drag our little closet out. That's another way you could do it. And let's go ahead and name these so you know what we're looking at. So we'll call this bedroom 1. Bedroom 2, closet 1, or you could call it hall closet. Or we just do that, hall closet. This is hall, or hallway. Maybe we'll pull this out just a little wider. Okay, and then let's say we have maybe a master bedroom over here. We can copy and paste. Copy this room. It's already large. Doesn't matter. Let's say this is the living room. We can click up here on a room, remember, or we can R, either way, shortcuts. Let's say this is our, oop, didn't mean to do that. Let's drag this out just a little bit. Make it a little bit smaller. Let's say this is the kitchen, for instance. Yeah, make it a little bit bigger. And we have a dining room that will fit in here. Remember, we can click on any of these walls, pull it out. Not the greatest shapes here, but let's make this a little bit better here. And then we'll say maybe we have a little pantry here behind the kitchen. Hold the control key down again, and we'll just pull this wall out to create a new room. And then we'll call this the garage. We'll rename these here shortly. And let's put a little bathroom in here in the master. We'll call this the master bathroom, of course. Okay, so there we do have our interior. So let's talk a little bit about putting doors and missing walls and windows in. So some of this is going to depend on the carrier, what their requirements are. So for instance, if you are painting any kind of interior rooms or ceilings that probably wouldn't come into play unless there's skylights or something like that, but we'll just deal with interior walls. You may want to check the carrier. If they require you to take out any openings when painting interiors, then you will need to include, obviously, any doors, missing walls, and windows. A lot of carriers, though, don't require you to take out spaces on interior paint unless it's some very large space. Maybe they have a guideline that says, no, don't take out for painting interior walls unless it's over 40 square feet, let's say 50 square feet. If you've got some big opening, sure, go ahead and draw that in Sketch so that Sketch is subtracting that out. Otherwise, you may not need to worry about it. Doors and missing walls are a little bit different in that if you are replacing or painting baseboards or detaching and resetting baseboards, you will need to put in missing walls and doorways, because calculations in the background on variable tools, Sketch is going to calculate the perimeter of that room, and it's going to take out where there is a door or a missing wall. And that means there's no baseboard there. We don't want to overpay the insured and pay for baseboards, obviously, that aren't installed in an opening. So you would definitely want to put those structures in the room. We'll look at that here shortly. It also, we talked about in another video, but you have to think about what you're replacing and how you would draw rooms. We're going to go back to this for a second, but let's say, for instance, you had damage in a living room and it was laminate flooring and there was a kitchen next to it, and the kitchen had tile flooring that was not damaged, and you were going to replace the entire laminate floor in the living room. So as you were drawing this living room, so let's say you drew your living room here, room 1, and you go, oh, I'm going to draw this little kitchen over here, so I'm going to just use my break tool, And I'm just going to not hold the control key down, but I'm going to drag this over. What using that technique does when you use the brake tool, but you do not hold the control key down, is it will pull that shape off of the existing room, but it won't create a separate room. In other words, it won't put a wall here. So this is just an extension of room 1, the living room. Well, if this was actually the kitchen and there was tile in this room, laminate in this room, and you were going to replace just this laminate in this room, you would not want to draw it this way, because you're going to use a variable code in the estimating side to put in F for floor for that laminate flooring line item, and it's going to think, because this is all one room, it's going to think that that laminate flooring is also installed right here when it is not. Again, you'd be overpaying the insured. So keep that in mind about what you're writing and what you're paying for on how you want to configure drawing interior rooms. So the way to do that would be, of course, yes, use the brake tool, but hold the control key down when you do it. That would create a separate room so that when you put F in this room to replace the laminate flooring, it would only replace this area and not this area. Just things to think about. Again, how you draw and what tools you use can also be dictated by what the carrier guidelines are and what is it that you're writing. What are you replacing in the estimate? That can be dictated by how you draw. Drawing can be dictated by the former. So let's go in and put some of these missing walls and doors in. So let's start with the living room, and let's say you walk into this area and it's just a missing wall. We're going to click our missing wall, drag it here. Let's take a look at this. Okay, great. We are looking good so far. Let's say that going into the dining room, it is completely open to the ceiling, floor to the ceiling. Maybe the whole wall is gone. You can click on a wall, highlight the wall, and delete the wall. That's one way to do it. If that's the way the house is built. Let's undo this. By the way, when you undo the wall, keep in mind we still have separate rooms. It's still calculated separately. It's just this wall is hidden. It's not there anymore. So let's undo this and say we didn't have the whole wall missing, but we had just a missing wall. Remember, that's M. If we want to click over here and just click our M, we have the missing wall tool. We drag a little area, whatever the measurement was. Now we have the missing wall into the dining room. But again, let's say that this missing wall goes all the way to the ceiling. You can always remember, go into Properties and change something. Let's go into the Properties of the missing wall, highlight it. It says, here's the width, and the height by default is 6 foot 8 inches. Let's change that to 8 feet because our default ceiling height is 8 feet. We want this opening to go right up to the ceiling. There we go. Quite easy. But you can do that. Remember, in Xactimate, you can select properties of just about anything and make changes or get information. Keep that in mind. So let's put some other missing walls in. Where would we maybe have some missing walls? Maybe into the kitchen, let's say. Let's say in the kitchen, you do walk right into the kitchen. We're going to take that whole wall out. Probably no other missing walls. Most of this is all going to be doorways. So let's put some doors in real quick. So we can select our icon up here, or again, D for door. It's going to put a default door in. So here's our little pantry. You can click on the door. You can drag the door back and forth in the wall. You can select up here on your tool menu, flip horizontal and flip vertical. Watch what happens to the door if I select these. It changes the configuration and orientation of the hinging, which way the door opens. Maybe this isn't a hinged door. Maybe let's say it's a pocket door. Pretty common with pantries. Let's change that door to a pocket door. Here it is right here under Style, Door Type. I'm going to the Properties, changing the default standard to Pocket. There we go. Now let's keep doing our doors. We'll keep selecting D's. Put this right here. D again. We want to flip this probably. It probably opens into this wall. That would be flipping it horizontally. And we'll put one in the closet here. I'm going to move this out a little bit. Master bedroom. That will flip horizontally and vertically. And then let's say we got one more door here that goes into the garage. Probably not the way this house would be built, but we're not architects, remember? We're just adjusters. So there we have some doors, missing walls. We've done some editing to some of that stuff. See all of our doors, our jambs, casing rather. You can also put some windows in. Let's look at that. Window would be W. So let's say we have a window here. 2 windows. Maybe we have a window in the kitchen. Now let's put a doorway here to get into the house. We might want to do that. And maybe we want to put a little wall here, right inside the doorway. Oops, there we go. Again, these are default windows. Remember, in preferences, you can go in and change those in preferences. You can go into the individual windows and change the type of window, the size of the window. So, now we have our first floor drawn. And let's do some estimate writing and look at how this correlates to the estimate and how we would use variable codes. So for instance, let's say that we are going to replace the flooring in the living room. And we're going to detach and reset the baseboards. It's laminate flooring. We're going to detach and reset the baseboards, paint the baseboards one coat, and replace the flooring just in the living room. So if we go look at the estimate, we see all of our rooms that we've drawn here. Now, depending on the tree, the estimating tree that you are using, you may be required to use a tree that's given to you by the carrier. For instance, with affix claims, you will. Other carriers, they don't require a tree. You can create your own tree. I would recommend, if you're sketching, drag those tree or the rooms in your sketch rooms up into the appropriate area and build your tree so that it is in order and it's easy to read and it makes sense to the insured, their contractors, the file reviewers. Don't leave this stuff down with all these different rooms and main level. They won't really know what this is. Create a good tree for them so that it makes sense. If you have an existing tree that you must use, then of course drag those up into the appropriate area of that carrier's tree. For this training purposes, we're just going to leave it down here though. So here's our living room, and we're going to click in here. We're going to drop a line item in for the laminate flooring. Let's search for that. We'll just use snap lock laminate. We'll drop it in. As we notice, Xactimate by default in the calculation field puts this letter F. This is a variable code. 521.18 square feet. We're putting this line item directly in a sketched room. So the sketched room is holding all of the measurements and calculating all of the measurements and calculations in the background. And by using a variable code, it puts the number in the line item for us. Here's the variable code for floor. And then Xactimate has already calculated the square footage of the floor, which is this number, and it puts it in and pays this amount of money for this database. Let's put the baseboards in. And we will change this to detach and reset. And again, by default, Xactimate puts a different variable code in. PF is perimeter floor, 87.17 lineal feet. 87.17. Let's go back to sketch. Remember, we put these missing walls and the doorways in. So there's one door, 1, 2, 3 missing walls. If we take any of these out, that lineal footage is going to change. Watch this. I'll select 2 of these, delete those, and now if we go back and look, that perimeter floor is going to be a higher number. Now it's 99.42. So that's the power of using sketch and variable codes. As long as you get your sketch drawn correctly, that is including roofs. If you get all of that drawn correctly to scale based on the measurements of the actual item, and you get all your doors and openings and everything in there properly, your estimate writing will go much quicker because now you can use codes. You can use macros with variable codes. You can put your own variable codes in here for the line items, or you can use the default codes that usually Xactimate has for you, as we're seeing here. Paint, let's look at paint. Let's paint the baseboards. P&T, P, now this is for walls, but look, we can change WC, that's the variable code by default. It thinks we want to paint the walls and the ceiling. No, let's just paint the perimeter floor. You could do it that way. Now the carrier may require you to use a particular line item, paint baseboard. One coat. That's fine. If they want to do that, which is PNTB, that would probably be the correct line item to use. I would recommend that. As you'll notice, because Xactimate knows we're painting a baseboard already, it puts the correct code in there, PF. So keep that in mind. That's kind of how these variable codes work. Very, very powerful. Same with roofing. If we go back into Sketch, if we right-click on any of these rooms and go to Properties, or double-click, we'll go to Properties as well, at the bottom, it shows all the variable codes. Here's the codes. You can actually type these in the calculation field of a line item, or again, Xactimate usually will put the correct code in there, and it pulls these numbers. Very, very cool. So I hope that makes some sense. We're going to keep going a little bit more. There's one other area I want to show you about dealing with rooms that have cabinets in them and using the block tool. But this was a quick tutorial on just drawing rooms, using some of the tools, how the variable codes work. Once you kind of understand the basic tools and the basic fundamentals of Sketch, it's really powerful and you can really get this stuff done really quickly. But before we go into the cabinet issue, I want to show you one other thing on just some annotations that are always a good idea. And this applies to roofing too. And that is, sometimes you need to put some stuff in, and you should probably on most sketches, to tell the story with your sketch. Just like you're doing with your narrative or your photos. Your sketch should tell the same story on its own as the rest of your estimate does. So let's take a look at an example of that. Let's say we have a bathroom, and we had a little toilet overflow in a bathroom. Let's make a hallway here. Again, different ways to do this. I'm doing it one method. And then let's say we have an adjacent bedroom. So I'll hold my control key out, pull this out here. Maybe it's a little bit bigger room. Bath. Bedroom, hall. And let's say we had a toilet in here that overflowed and it migrated, the water migrated under the stud wall into this area of this room and then into this hallway, down the hallway. So usually with water on interior, you always want to tell everybody and put in your sketch and in your photos really, and in your narrative, it all should parallel each other. what the water source was. Where did the water come from and how did it get in the house? Very, very important for causes of loss and causation. So let's do that. You can do arrows, you can do the text tool, you can do multiples of that. You can use what's really cool, I haven't showed you yet. If you click in here in the blank viewing area and do Shift Enter, it opens up some other tabs. And down in this area at the bottom where you can put line items, it has some tabs, and one of those is symbols. And built in to Xactimate is all these symbols. Plumbing, plants, furniture. You can put vehicles in. In this case, let's go to plumbing, and we want to grab a toilet. And it's a little image of a toilet or a little drawing of a toilet. You can size it. You can rotate it. And let's say here's our toilet over here where the water overflowed. We'll make it a little bit larger. Pretty big toilet, but we can see it a little bit better. So now we've put a little toilet in there. You could put a little block in there. You could put a little dot in there. It doesn't really matter. I would go up to annotations, and let's get the text tool and say water source equals toilet overflow. Now, let's tell everybody where the water went, how it migrated, what it damaged. There's different ways to do that. It's up to you. Just show us. Maybe you want to use the ellipse tool. Let's change our line color to red in our drawing tools here. We're in annotation. And maybe we'll make the line width a little bit larger. Maybe you want to use the ellipse tool and say, water damaged the entire bathroom. It migrated under this wall and got right here, caused damage. And it also migrated out into the hallway right here. There you go. That tells the story. It's got a picture of the toilet. Not necessary, but at least, even if you didn't have the toilet in here, for instance, you said it's a water source is a toilet overflow. Maybe you want to add a little arrow, for instance. Something like that. Just tell us the story. Let everybody know what's going on. If you didn't want to use these tools and you want to do this or both, you could also use arrows and say water damage. And here, let's say both. We want to do this. Here's damage here, and then the water migrated across into the other room. We can copy and paste this. We'll change the shape of this. You could make these different colors. You can do all kinds of stuff to be creative to help tell the story. Very, very good idea to do this. All right, so let's delete that. Get all this out. Remember to hide or view these particular panes. Just click in the blank view screen and then Shift Enter is the keystroke. Okay, so let's talk at the end here about when we're dealing with cabinets. And typically this is going to be in kitchens. You can use the dimensioning tool, which is another tool to put measurements into a room, just like Sketch, except you're not drawing the room. There's another training video we have on the dimensioning tool. I personally prefer the dimensioning tool when I'm doing interiors. It's faster and easier. But it doesn't work as well when we're dealing with rooms with cabinets on floors and ceilings, for instance, and touching walls. If we're doing flooring or painting walls and we don't want to paint all the wall because the cabinets are on the wall, because the dimensioning tool only takes out missing walls on walls. You can't do that on floors and ceiling with the dimensioning tool. And just so you know, on the dimensioning tool, if you go to the estimating group and looking at the rooms here, you can tell that a room has been used with a dimensioning tool or dimensioned by looking at the icon. It's not anymore this standard yellow folder icon. It's a little tape measure icon. This tells you that this room which formerly was one of these yellow standard folders, has been dimensioned using the dimensioning tool. If we double click on this, this is an example. It's showing you there's dimensions in here with 3 missing walls. So if you're not familiar with this tool, you may want to go take a look at that other video. Very powerful tool, but it does the same thing basically as Sketch, except you're just not drawing it. You're putting numbers in with preset shapes. You can put missing walls in only on the walls, not on the floors and ceilings. And you do that directly right here in the estimating tree, not in Sketch. And it calculates the same way as Sketch does. You can use variable codes in dimensioned rooms, just like you can Sketch. It's holding all the measurements and calculating all the calculations in the background that will coincide with using variable codes. So both very powerful tools. But if you're going to do rooms that have cabinets, you probably need to sketch that room. And here's why. We want to use a tool called the block tool. This is it right here. We're in the tools menu and the block tool. So let's draw a little room. This will be our kitchen. We're going to kind of do a little larger than life kitchen, let's say, just so we can see a little easier. So here's our kitchen. And let's say, for instance, that we want to replace the flooring in this room, but we have photo documented that the lower cabinets are not installed over the flooring. In other words, the flooring stops at the cabinet and is installed around the cabinets. So we want to use a variable code. We want to tell Xactimate, I want to use F for my flooring in here. Let's say it's laminate flooring. So I want to use F as my line item to replace the entire floor. But I want Xactimate to subtract out the square footage underneath the cabinets. I want it to do it automatically for me. So I'm going to do that by using the block tool. So let's click on the block tool. We'll pull out just a standard little cabinet, usually roughly about 2.5 foot wide, maybe 2 foot 4 inches. We'll go 2.5. And let's look at this in 3D view. It's just a 3D block. We'll move it into the room shortly. What you can do, though, is you can tell Xactimate properties of this block to subtract out any sides of this. You can say, I want you to subtract out the underside of the block, Xactimate, so that when this block is sitting on that kitchen floor, it will calculate the entire room wall to wall, but it knows that wherever the bottom of these blocks are touching that floor, it will subtract out the square footage of the block. You can also do the same thing by subtracting out the back of the blocks. This part right here, for instance, or this part that's touching the walls. Why would you do that? Well, you would want to set that setting on the block if you were painting all the walls in the kitchen, but you're not going to paint behind the cabinets probably. So you want Xactimate to tell you what's all the wall square footage of all 4 walls, ceiling to floor, all the way around, less where the backs of cabinets touch the wall. Another thing you would want to do, again, on the flooring, is you can also tell Xactimate on the block, I want you to take the lineal footage, not square footage, but the length of the blocks on either side. I want you to take the lineal footage out. That's going to come into play when we are doing baseboard. So we have baseboard going all the way around the room. It's the same concept. It's telling Xactimate, I'm going to use PF, perimeter floor, Xactimate. I want you to paint all the baseboards in the kitchen, but I want the measurement to be the variable code PF, perimeter floor, but I've told the blocks to subtract out that lineal footage of the blocks, the cabinets. So it will give me the entire perimeter floor minus the length of the blocks. So let's take a look at that real quick. We'll click on the block, go to Properties, and under Behavior is where we're going to do these settings. So let's look at them real quick. There's typically five settings on this. So it says Remove Floor Lineal Footage Behind the Block. In this case, let's say Yes. We click on the field, drop the menu down to Yes. Again, we talked about this earlier. Setting these settings and how you draw the rooms with walls and openings and connections or extensions of the same room or not, separate rooms, settings like this and properties, a lot of this will be dictated by what you're writing. So for instance, in this room, let's say it didn't have any baseboards. Might be unusual, but let's say there were no baseboards in the room. But you're going to replace the tile or the laminate floor. Well, you wouldn't need to change the setting probably because you're not dealing with anything with lineal footage. So you probably don't need to worry about it. But we're going to say there is baseboards that we're going to paint. We're going to detach and reset baseboards to get the flooring out. And we're going to paint the baseboards. Okay, so let's set remove floor lineal footage behind the blocks. We want to set that to yes. We want to have it removed. Remove the ceiling lineal footage. This would be no. When would we use this? We would use this probably and say yes if we had upper cabinets that touched the ceiling and there was crown molding all around the ceiling. We would want to take that lineal footage out, just like baseboards, but it's up on the ceiling now. Crown molding rather than baseboard. Remove square footage behind the block. Yes, this is what we talked about a few minutes ago. We do want Xactimate to remove that if we're painting the walls. And let's say we are. We're going to do the floor and the walls. Remove square footage under the block. Absolutely. We want it to take out that flooring. Remove square footage above the top side of the block. Oh, my bad. I need to set that underneath to yes. Remove square footage under. And then remove an area above the block? No. When would we use that? If the upper cabinets were touching the ceiling and we were replacing drywall or we were painting the ceiling, for instance, then we would set that to yes. We wanted to subtract that out. So we've got our settings here. Let's go drop this in and see what this looks like. Now, if we go to the room, for instance, and look at F, 380.79 feet, perimeter floor, 78.17 lineal feet. Let's drop this block in here and see what happens. It should subtract out the appropriate lineal footage and square footage. Let's look at the room again. Look at the floor. Yes, it did. It went down. Let's look at the perimeter floor. It sure did. It went down. The block is working properly. Let's take a look at it in 3D view. Excellent. Now, our tools work the same with the block. We can stretch it, drag it. We can use our brake tool. Click over here. We can pull off another section of cabinet. We can copy it and paste it, rotate it, put it in another corner if we want. And again, if we keep doing this, those measurements and calculations are going to change. Let's look again. Our floor keeps going down because we keep dropping blocks in. It's subtracting out the underside of that block. If we look at the perimeter floor, same thing. It keeps going down because it's taking out the length, the lineal footage of the back of the blocks that's touching the wall. There's no baseboard back there. Now the baseboard is only probably here and on these walls. Of course, if we had a doorway in here or a missing wall, the perimeter floor would even be smaller. It's also taking out square footage of the walls. Let's look at W for walls. Currently, it's at 521.83. Watch what happens if we move both of these blocks outside the room. Let's go look at the variable code. Now the walls have kicked back up to 625.33. So all of our properties we set these blocks to are working exactly as we wanted them to. You can also do upper cabinets. You can use these, move them up and down. You want to maybe change the settings or start a new block. We'll say it's 2 foot 4 inches. Go to properties, In this case, these are the uppers. We probably only need to do one setting on this if there's no crown molding and they're not touching the ceiling and all that. We're not painting the ceiling, just the walls. So we want to remove the square footage behind the block, on the back of the block. That's what's touching the wall. So let's set that to yes. That's the only one we need on really probably these upper cabinets. And let's put it in here. And we'll notice by default, it's still going to be on the floor. We need to get it up off the floor. It's an upper cabinet. Again, properties. Let's look at the measurements here and where it's located. So the distance from the floor is 0 inches. The bottom of it is right on the floor. We want to change this and move it up. How high? Well, we know our ceilings are 8 feet. We know the default cabinet height is 3 feet. So we want to move it 3 foot and another 2 foot up. So that means the upper cabinet that's 3 foot tall is going to be on the top 3 foot of the room. So we want to set this number to 5 feet off the floor. Now let's go look. Perfect. And that back of that block, because we set that setting just like the lower cabinets, it's also subtracting out of the square footage of the walls. The bigger we make it, the more it's subtracting out. You can also move these over. Let's say you had, let's move this back down. Well, let's say over here you had the stove, for instance, maybe the dishwasher. And maybe you had cabinets all the way across the whole top. Because you have the property set 5 feet off the ground, even though you stack these on top of the lowers in the drawing, it's still up higher. Perfect. So I hope that makes some sense, and that might aid you when you're doing flooring and painting and things like that in rooms that have cabinets, and the block tools are very, very powerful for that. So again, if you have any other questions, please take a look at our other training videos. You can also contact your claims supervisor or claims manager, and they'll be happy to help you as well. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you on the next training video.